taking flight on a zillion wings in this episode of Metroidvania Works. In the wake of Metroid and Vania's near simultaneous arrival, the Metroidvania genre would begin to take form. However, it would not be an overnight process by any measure. This means the next few action RPGs to make their way into the world felt like half measures. Ambitious, yes. Experimental, definitely, but not quite fully formed in the shape of what we think of as Metroidvania just yet. Coming directly on the heels of Milon's Secret Castle, we have another notable Famicom action RPG-ish kinda game. Sunsoft's Madara no Tsubasa, or the Wing of Madoola. Sunsoft will show up several times later in the Metroidvania Works chronicle, and Wing of Madoola is a critical transition away from the company's simplistic early releases and its meatier later works. Sunsoft got its start mostly porting American and European computer games to Famicom, and it would soon enter the US with arcade conversions. But before that initiative took hold, the company also began developing its own games in Japan, beginning with the infamous Atlantis no Nazo. Known for its intoxicating mix of ambitious vision and frustrating design, Atlantis no Nazo drew heavily upon proto-Metroidvania tropes, specifically Pitfall and its sequel. In fact, Activision very nearly localized it for the US as a sequel to Super Pitfall, a game defined by a similar combination of sweeping ambition and horrifying production values. While Atlantis no Nazo's granular, level-based structure pushes it a bit too far toward the action arcade realm to really belong in this overview, it bears mentioning because it clearly provided the baseline for Sunsoft's next epic creation, the Wing of Madoola. Admittedly, Madoola also works under a level-by-level structure, but you can really see the pieces of action and RPG coming together here. This is a game that helped pave the way for more robust action RPGs like Zelda 2 and Phazanadu, a Falcom-esque adventure made exclusively for consoles. With Madoola, you can definitely see the shift underway on the Japanese gaming side. It's that industry's creators reshaped existing genres to better suit the audience's tastes. Where Atlantis no Nazo amounted to a puzzle-heavy take on Pitfall and Super Mario Bros. With limited action set in 100 small stages loaded with hazards and secrets, Madoola takes place across a mere 16 stages, which are constructed to be far larger and require a considerable amount of exploration and wandering. Protagonist Lucia, who as the second female lead character featured in the series also speaks to another trend in Japanese games around this time, isn't limited to the same set of skills as Win from Atlantis no Nazo. Where he could run, jump, and drop bombs, she wields a sword, learns magic, and levels up her strength and endurance as she advances. Of course, Madoola shipped about half a year after Enix's Dragon Quest made its debut in Japan, a game that reshaped the console industry there with tectonic force. Madoola arrived a bit too soon after Dragon Quest to have likely been strongly influenced by it, especially since Dragon Quest Mania didn't really take hold until the sequel arrived in January 1987. Instead, as we've seen with games like Zelda, Metroid, and Vampire Killer, the collective Japanese console industry had begun exploring RPG concepts as a way to distinguish home games from those of the arcade. Dragon Quest may have had the greatest impact, but it was hardly alone. Of course, as we can see with Madoola, a big part of what drove Dragon Quest's popularity was the fact that it was good. Most games that tried to integrate RPG mechanics were still very rough around the edges in 1986, and Madoola today comes off as an almost unplayable mess. It's certainly not the worst game I've ever played, but you can see that Sunsoft hadn't quite figured out the meaning of user-friendly. The game suffers from a lot of little quirks that bog it down. For example, it's a huge, sprawling action adventure, but not only can you not save your progress with a password or battery, it seems like you can't actually continue. It does turn out that there is a not-so-secret continue feature that allows you to resume progress in the most recent stage you've reached if you hold select while starting the game at the title screen. But it's easy to forget this in the heat of frustration from yet another cheap death, and whoops, accidentally start a fresh game by forgetting to hold select, thus losing all your progress. Why not just make the continue feature explicit? But then this is a game where speedy enemies attack in endless waves from all directions, yet Lucia lacks any sort of mercy invincibility. While developers did occasionally go too lenient with invincibility, as seen in Nintendo's Metroidvania adjacent Kid Icarus, which was released the same month as Madoola, Sunsoft strayed way too far in the other direction. Lucia has a healthy hit point total to sustain her life, but that can be whittled to zero in a matter of seconds, thanks to the way enemies aggressively sap her health the moment they make it past her guard. It doesn't help that the controls are very spotty, with floppy jump physics and stiff combat controls. The later stages combine relentless enemies with iffy platform hopping design, bringing together the worst of both worlds and absolutely draining any sense of entertainment value from Madoola. And yet, the game almost works. There are some good creative instincts at work here. Lucia grows in strength as you explore each stage and uncover upgrades. She gains new abilities which improve her survivability, and some skill boosts are tucked in out-of-the-way locations, so the game gives you a meaningful reason to explore. Each stage is a self-contained mini labyrinth of caves and crannies to be uncovered, and the frustration of Madoola's more irritating elements is almost balanced by the satisfaction of actual accomplishment. Wing of Madoola isn't really a good game, but it's a promising one, and the ideas Sunsoft tested out here would be realized to far more satisfying effect by a number of 1987 creations. Unfortunately, both tech's Relics and Kokuyosai, or Relics the Dark Fortress, isn't one of those. We're straying a little bit from pure chronological order here because 1987 would prove to be a banner year for the Metroidvania genre, and there's some value in grouping the games that don't quite get it right together here. On its surface, Relics looks like a mysterious Metroid-inspired adventure. I'm not sure how true that actually is, since it's a sequel/remake for an MSX game originally published around the same time as Metroid, but at the very least, it's hard not to come away with the impression that both Metroid and Relic drank from the same font of inspiration, namely Ridley Scott's Alien. Unfortunately, this game is just a mess. Released for Famicom Disk System in April 1987, Relics falls afoul of the quirks of the hardware and some bewildering technical choices. I've never in my life experienced a game that suffers from the disk access issues that Relics does. The disk system is fairly well known for sometimes bogging down action games with load times and even disk swapping, as seen at the very beginning of a game we'll explore in a few episodes, but Relics is something else entirely. There's a very ambitious design at play here in which players reshape the world around them by destroying walls and floors to reveal secrets and open passages, but it's a poor fit for diskette. In Relics, it feels like you're confronted with a load screen every few steps you take. It's a shame because the underlying concept behind Relics is really interesting and deserves a better arena than this technical disaster. You control an astronaut exploring the catacombs of an unknown world, but the sci-fi vibe is complemented by an element of mysticism. It's one part Space Odyssey, one part Curse of the Pharaoh. Your key mechanic here is possession. You need to project your protagonist's consciousness into other bodies in order to progress. Other games like Abe's Odyssey, Messiah, and The Third Birthday would do this better years later, but it's a pretty inventive and clever concept for a 1987 adventure. Each of the different body types you can control wield different weapons and offer different ways to navigate the world. Unlike in a proper Metroidvania, few of your power-ups and skills here are permanent. Your possessions are temporary and dependent on the appearance of the proper creatures, so it doesn't work like something along the lines of Wonder Boy and Monster World, or Legacy of the Wizard, where you can swap between different forms as needed. Likewise, your tools, keys, lamps, offensive and defensive power-ups, are temporary as well. Even exposed secrets appear to be fleeting as the walls seem to repair themselves after you blast them. Relics is pretty much emblematic of some of the more innovative games of this era. Full of big ideas, so intriguing you can't help but want to play, so clumsy you can't bear to play. Like Xanadu and Hydlide, this ambitious adventure crawled at a snail's pace due to loading times so that later games could run. And finally, one more kinda there Metroidvania adjacent game, Sega's Zillion for Master System. Initially released in Japan in May 1987, Zillion is often regarded as Sega's answer to Metroid. But no. Zillion takes its inspiration from Epyx's Impossible Mission, a 1984 computer game that probably should have been included in a previous episode. Given Sega's propensity for localizing Western computer hits into good-looking arcade conversions, such as Choplifter and Pitfall 2, there's no reason to think that Zillion wasn't inspired by Impossible Mission, or maybe even began life with the hope or intent of it being a direct adaptation. Who knows? In any case, Zillion ties into a completely different property in the end. It's part of a multimedia blitz to promote a toy light gun, and directly adapts the Tatsunoko anime Red Spot Zillion. Players control the show's protagonist, JJ, as he infiltrates the enemy base. Although the game initially appears to play out as a simple run-and-gun scrolling platformer, this intro sequence turns out to be a prelude to the real game, which consists of a single sprawling maze made up of individual rooms. Zillion verges on a true Metroidvania. JJ's upgrade path isn't simply about becoming stronger, it helps grant you access to new areas. Zillion takes its core mechanic straight from Impossible Mission, in that you delve further into the maze by uncovering key codes. The codes here consists of mangled or mirrored Arabic numerals, and they're randomized each time you play, so you can't simply skip the code collection process and proceed directly to each passcode lock. Codes are hidden in containers scattered in each room, though the containers can also contain other goodies, such as power-ups. You gather code fragments in each room, then punch them into a terminal to open the door or elevator to the next area. Terminals also allow you to perform other actions, such as disabling barriers or sensors. You need to find key cards before you can input codes though. Using a code to affect objects within a room expends a card. You can only retrieve a card when you use it to input the door code. Also hidden within the maze are JJ's two allies, Apple and Champ. Rescuing them allows you to extend your play chances, since it's game over once JJ runs out of health. Ultimately, your goal in Zillion is to destroy the enemy base's main computer. It's a fairly large game and a complex one, though it does come off a bit dated thanks to its extremely limited visuals. There are only 3 zones in the enemy base, which makes for a very monotonous and sometimes confusing adventure. It's also really annoying to play due to its clumsy controls. You're constantly engaging in shootouts, but you lack the agility to take out any but the lowest level grunts without taking a hit in return. And the game is full of annoying, untelegraphed traps that can kill you in an instant without warning. Still, it's a step towards something bigger for Sega, and the fact that they invested this much effort into a game designed to sell toys is pretty remarkable. So, while these 3 games don't quite get it right, they all speak to the collective drive taking hold of Japanese game creators in the mid-80s to turn action console games into something bigger and better. And in the coming episodes, we'll see what bigger and better truly meant.